Hello and welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero and I'll be your host this evening. I have a quick and fun one for you guys today. So I've been playing way more poker this past week than normal. Several fans of the vlog are in town this month for the WPT and contacted me for a meetup. Most notably, Tom Ferguson and Richard Simmons, which many of you guys might recognize from the comments in my videos. I tried my best to make it happen, which means I played several days in a row and even came back on Sunday night, riding on only 3 hours of sleep after a 12-hour poker binger the night before. Yeah, I know. It's not my usual schedule, or even what I recommend anyone else try to copy. But I'm a sucker for meeting my fans. Anyways, for this session we'll be playing 2-5 No Limit Hold'em at the Wynn Encore in Las Vegas, where I buy in for 1,500, which is 300 big blinds. It's Sunday night on December the 16th, although technically Monday morning, since we don't start until 12:59 in the morning. 10 minutes into the session, under the gun opens to 15 with a stack of about 1,100. The button and small blind both call. I look down at pocket 8s in the big blind. Okay, so here I have a couple of options. If my opponent had opened bigger, like to 20 or 25, I would have only just smooth called here and tried to set mine. My position sucks, and my opponent would not be showing any sort of weakness with a 4 to 5x open size. However, players in the low stakes almost always raise with accordance to their hand strength, and a 3x open size is way more often than not a pretty weak hand. You may have heard that raises from the under the gun position are usually very strong. This may apply to tournaments and possibly in high stakes, but I'm here to tell you, this is rarely ever the case in 1-3 or even in the 2-5 stakes. Low stakes players rarely ever take position into consideration. So knowing all of this, I can either call for 10 more and play my hand hoping to hit a set, or I can play it aggressively and potentially take down the trapped $45 without a fight. Most of the time I will choose the former option and just call here, but as I often preach, you never want to do anything 100% of the time. This time, I decide to take the much more aggressive route and 3-bet the action up to 115. All of my opponents quickly fold, and I show what looks to be a random 8 to set the tone for the night that I'm a crazy wild action player. Occasionally making plays like this will deceive opponents, especially opponents whom I played with for many years, into thinking that I'm much more loose than I actually am. 10 minutes later, the hijack opens to 20. The cutoff calls. I'm holding ace-queen offsuit in the big blind. Ace-queen should be a much better hand than a $20 late position open. Now, if I were in position, like for instance if I were on the button, I might only re-raise here to about 75 or 80, but since my position is absolutely terrible in the big blind, I want to give myself a better chance to take down the trap money without seeing a flop. So I 3-bet the action up to 120. Again, both of my opponents in this hand simply fold, so I take down another pot without any resistance. A few minutes later, the same opponent opens to 20 under the gun. Everyone else folds around to me in the small blind, with me holding ace-queen yet again. Last time I raised my opponent to 120 with this hand. This time I'm deciding to only just call. In the last 20 minutes since sitting down, I've already made 2 large 3-bets, so my table image is probably really aggressive right now. This time I want to under-rep my hand. My opponents will never put me on such a strong hand after only just calling a $20 open after portraying a really aggressive table image, and I might stand to win a bigger pot instead of just taking down the $20 preflop. The big blind ends up folding, so we go heads up to flop of 10, deuce, 10, rainbow. We don't flop anything at all, but there's a good chance we might still be good right now. If I were the preflop aggressor, I would c-bet small on this sort of polarizing flop with my entire range, whether it's random suited connectors, an overpair, trip 10s, or in this case, ace high. But since I'm not in fact the original raiser, and I'm out of position, I start with a check. Surprisingly, my opponent throws out a massive pot size bet of 40 into the pot of 45. This is not a standard play by any stretch. Remember how I said if I were the preflop aggressor that I would c-bet small with my entire range? I mean, there are no draws of any kind. It's not a rational play to bet this hard with any strong hand here when there shouldn't be much to be afraid of, especially when our opponent also has position here. So I think he is either completely bluffing with a weaker hand or only has a really small pocket pair at best. Either way, he doesn't want to see another card. So knowing all of this, I decided to call with our ace high and plan on stealing the pot on later streets, assuming we don't improve. Think about it. If we were holding a 10 here, we would never check raise on such a dry board, right? So if push comes to shove, and we don't actually end up making anything, we can always turn our hand into a bluff later to represent trip 10s. Okay, so the turn comes, and it's a king of clubs, putting 2 clubs on board. We don't actually hit a pair, but we do improve to include a gut shot straight draw along with our ace high. A jack on the river would give us Broadway, and an ace would most likely be good as well. Let's see how our opponent reacts to this king. I check again. As expected, our opponent slows down, betting only half pot this time for a 60. Either he's afraid of that king, since he really does only have some small pocket pair, or he actually hit that king, and now he's turning his hand from a bluff into a value bet. I'm not completely sure which is true. No need to get wet and wild right here and now. There's still another card yet to come. So again, I only just make the call. The river brings in our much needed ace of diamonds. We improve to top pair, but on this paired board, we're actually chopping with much weaker aces. Jack Queen does make a straight, but we shouldn't need to worry about that sort of hand unless we face a raise here. If we had completely whiffed the river, I might have led with a really large pot-sized bet of about 200 or so, but since we actually improved, I want to go for value. There's a very strong chance our opponent would check back this river, regardless of what he's holding, given the run out. We do not want that to happen, now that we've improved. Our opponent likely won't call any reasonable bet if he's only just holding a small pocket pair, so instead let's target his King X holdings. I lead with a bet of 135 into the pot of 245. Unfortunately, our opponent does not in fact pay us off as he puts in the fold, but at least we didn't get punished for playing our hand a little bit more passive than usual. The reason that I often preach for my audience to occasionally vary your playstyle, even with the exact same hands, is because I've been playing here at the Win Encore for over 10 years, seeing lots and lots of the same faces. If my playstyle were not dynamic, my opponents would have long since taken notice and exploited me by now. This is even more true now that I have a vlog for all the world to see. I imagine that a lot of you play in the same local casinos day in and day out. Therefore, you too also need to learn how to conceal your playstyle using a bit of randomization and deviation. A few hands later, under the gun opens to 15. I call in the cutoff with King-Queen offsuit. I prefer to call with this sort of hand as opposed to 3-betting to keep in my opponent's dominated King and Queen X holdings. In case we flop top pair, our opponents will be much less likely to put such a hand in our range considering our aggressive playstyle. So here everyone else folds, so we go heads up in position to flop of 8, Queen 9 with 2 clubs and a heart. We flop top pair with a great kicker on an extremely wet board. Jack 10 would have flopped the nuts. Under the gun c-bets for 15, which we recognize is an extremely weak bet on this type of board. So I fast play our hand and immediately raise to 45. If we face aggression here in the form of a re-raise, we can escape with minimal damage and make an easy fold. Instead, our opponent only just calls, so there's a very good chance we're ahead right now. The turn brings in a 6 of diamonds, not changing a whole lot unless our opponent were holding 10-7. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but it's not completely inconceivable for our opponent to have opened with such a hand.
I raised the action to $10. This is definitely too wide to be in my under the gun opening range, but I'm imperfect, what can I say?
If this board were slightly less connected, I would go for max value here with a full pot size bet, but I'm not 100% positive we are in fact ahead right now. So I lead with a 2/3 pot size bet of 80 into the pot of 125. Again, if we face a check raise, I plan on just folding. Instead, our opponent only just smooth calls yet again. So at this point, we are almost positive we're currently holding the best hand. There is some chance our opponent is carefully playing a hand like 8-9 suited, but that's about it. So the river comes, and it pairs the board with an 8 of spades. Perfect. Most of the draws have missed. Our opponent checks for a 3rd time. A missed flush draw won't call us here for anything considerable, so instead let's target our opponent's pair plus straight draw combinations, like Queen Jack, Queen 10, 9-10, or something similar. I lead with a really small value bet of 100 into the pot of 285. I'm very specifically targeting weak hands that are best suited as bluff catchers who think that we might actually have been the one on the flush draw. Unfortunately, our opponent folds, but we do scoop yet another pot. The very next hand, there's a live 10. I look down at pocket aces in the hijack. Pocket freaking rockets. Damn, I'm on fire. Hopefully I'm not about to get punished. When the action folds around to me, I start with a 5x raise to 50. My table isn't too 3-bet heavy, aside from the ones coming from me, so I want to use a sizing that will discourage too many players from entering into the pot. The button and big blind both end up calling, but the straddle folds. The flop comes deuce, deuce, king, with 2 hearts and a spade. This is a pretty polarizing flop. If someone is holding a king, I'm crushing them to only 2 outs, since they can't really improve to 2 pairs. If someone is randomly holding a deuce for a $50 pre-flop raise, then I'm the one who's actually drawing to 2 outs. When the big blind checks, I can't really use a small size here, since pocket pairs are unlikely to stick around with that king out there. So I may as well just target anyone with a king or the heart flush draw, using a larger size bet. So I throw out a 2/3 pot size bet of 100 into the pot of 160. Both opponents just fold, so I scoop yet another smallish pot. The very next hand, I look down at pocket aces yet again. Same suits and everything. Okay, there's no way this session is going to go this smoothly, because this is just ridiculous. I bet I'm just getting set up with a bunch of small wins to lube me up for a massive loss. Here, under the gun opens for 20. With everyone still yet to act behind me, I 3-bet the action up to 80 from the middle position. I'm technically also the low jack for this hand since we're currently only 7-handed. I suppose I could go as low as 60 here, but I don't want to screw around with a hand where almost every single flop will look deceptively safe. So for my considerable raise, everyone else folds, but the under the gun original raiser makes the call with a large stack that covers me. The flop comes deuce, 3, 5, rainbow. Ace 4 flops a wheel, and 4, 6 would have flopped the nuts, but those sorts of hands are a lot less likely, especially when I'm already holding 2 of the possible aces. This flop is extremely low, so unless our opponent is the sort who open raises with super tiny pocket pairs, odds are he's only drawing to 2 outs with whatever pocket pair he is actually holding. So when he checks the action over, I start with an extremely small down bet to 50. There's no need to use a large sizing here on this sort of flop. As expected, our opponent makes the call. The turn brings in a 3 of clubs, pairing the middle pair, but keeping the board rainbow. Good. If my opponent held an overpair on the flop, he still has an overpair now. He'll be very unlikely to fold to my turn bet. This 3 shouldn't make much of a difference considering there are no combinations of a suited ace 3 my opponent could be holding. I'm holding the ace of spades and hearts, and the 3 of clubs and diamonds are already accounted for. So when he checks it over to me, I continue with the bet on the smaller side, betting 100 into the pot of 265. Surprisingly, my opponent puts in a check raise to 300. This is not ideal. Aside from crazy action players like myself, recreational players rarely put in a check raise on the turn or the river as a bluff. Whatever he's holding, he thinks he has the best hand. It is admittedly true that I have been extremely aggressive these past 40 minutes since I've been on the table. So maybe my opponent just thinks I'm full of air. I mean, that's the optimistic hope anyways. Most of my hands have not come to showdown, so the table doesn't actually know that I've been getting dealt monsters. I mean, I do lose to ace 4 suited, but there are only 2 combinations of that. I beat a whole plethora of overpairs like kings or queens, which my opponent could be slow playing and think he's currently good. Still, I need to proceed with caution, so I only just call. The river brings in a straight completing 6 of clubs. Now any 4 makes a straight, although the chances that I'm ever holding one of those in this spot is pretty close to 0. Probably realizing that, my opponent lets loose a terrifying bet of 525 into the pot of 865. I didn't call on the turn, hoping to improve with a 2-outer, so if I thought I was ahead on the turn, I need to make this call here. Dejectedly, I make the crying call, hoping that my opponent turns over paint, but unfortunately, he does not. He tables pocket 5s for a flop top set and turn boat. And just like that, not only do we lose all of our early game profits, but now we're in the hole for nearly $600. Sigh. I knew everything was shaping up way too good to last. I suppose there is merit to folding on the river because the straight completing card didn't faze my opponent one bit. But in all honesty, I'm never going to have a 4 there given the preflop action. Anyways, I just dust myself off and try not to let that hand get to me, putting a target on my opponent's back and promising revenge.
I will have my vengeance.
Hey guys, some fun announcements. So I'm about to be featured on a top poker pros channel, and we're talking like one of the really big guys, like top 100 in the world. I can't say who it is because I don't want to ruin the surprise, but I'm sure most of you know him. Okay, what else is new? I have an official endorsement, I guess it's called a sponsorship, for our VPN. I need to get off my lazy butt to actually make the advertisement though, and that's hard because you guys know I am like really lazy. What else? Oh, in December, I met up with a lot of fans and viewers of the vlog. I didn't hardly get any sleep, and I played some really long marathon sessions to try to make it happen. But on that subject, I'm gonna try to arrange for a real, actual meetup game. So I'm gonna go talk to the Venetian and try to make it a real thing. Let's see what else. Oh, you know how Live at the Lodge is always like, online poker is back. Get the description in the details below. Well, I don't have a catchy slogan like that, so instead I have to just shamelessly plug myself in. I recently introduced a friend of mine to ClubGG, and already in the first week, he was super lucky and took part of a bad beat jackpot, and he got a table share for like a little over 6,500 bucks. So if you guys are thirsty and you're hoping you can get lucky and do the same, go ahead and click on the description to find out what clubs I endorse. And until then, enjoy the rest of the video. Okay, so this next hand happens almost a full hour later. Our old table has since broken, so we've been moved to a new full table. Here there's a live 10. The middle position opens for 35. He's the same opponent who cracked our aces earlier with his pocket 5s. And you're not going to believe this. Well, maybe you will since you can see it on my screen, but I'm sitting here with the same freaking hand again. Pocket freaking aces. Same suits and everything. What the heck are the odds of that? Are we going to let our earlier trauma dictate how we play this hand? Should I only just call here to keep the pot small and make sure we don't lose another big pot? Heck no. I'd 3-bet the action immediately up to 125. I'm not here to screw around. We're owed some revenge. Everyone else folds, but undaunted, our opponent can't pass up the opportunity to crack 2 of Aero's pocket aces in a single sitting, so he makes the call. The flop comes queen, 7, king, rainbow. This is not ideal. We lose to pocket queens, pocket kings, queen king suited, and we'll only very specifically get value from a hand like ace king, but we're blocking 2 of those aces, making such a hand less likely. I mean, I guess we do get value from a hand like king jack suited, but not many people are willing to play such a hand for 125 preflop out of position. I know I sure as heck wouldn't. So when our opponent starts with a check, I proceed with caution and throw out the usual small down bet to 75 into the pot of 265. This should look very suspicious from my opponent's perspective and get a call from all sorts of weaker hands, which is what we want. We don't want to go ape wild here and bet huge, otherwise we're only going to get a call from better hands. Surely enough, for the small price point, our opponent does indeed make the call. The turn brings in an unsightly jack of diamonds, putting 2 diamonds on board. This is a pretty terrible card. Any meaningful pocket pair below ours has since caught up. King jack suited has caught up. Queen jack suited has caught up. And heck, even ace 10 suited just made the nuts, and 9-10 suited makes a straight as well. So when our opponent checks for a second time, I'm not about to touch this board with a 10-foot pole. In fact, if our opponent had simply just led with a pot-sized bet, I would have just folded. There are boards that are good for overpairs, but this ain't one of them. So anyways, the river comes, and wouldn't you know it, it's a deuce of diamonds. So now even the backdoor flush draw gets there. There's so much out there that beats our aces, it's not even funny. But when our opponent checks for a 3rd time, this is what separates a professional from a recreational player. I want to eke out every tiny edge whenever possible. I mean, look at this board. This is surely not a very good board for our hand. However, you know who else has shown fear on this board? Our opponent. He called our very tiny flop bet, but didn't bother betting on the river, even though we both checked the turn. So now I want to target all of his 1-pair holdings with an extremely small river bet, hands like ace queen or ace king. Us holding 2 aces here isn't ideal, as it does decrease the odds that our opponent is holding such a hand, but it doesn't make it impossible either. I throw out a laughable bet of 75 into the pot of 415. Yes, I realize this is less than a 20% pot size bet, but hey man, 75 bucks is still 75 bucks. People in this economy have a hard enough time finding a $20 an hour job. I'm not about to scoff at making a quick 75 bucks. This sort of tiny value bet sizing will make it irresistible for ace-queen or ace-king to fold. And surely enough, our opponent does indeed put in the call. We table our hand, and he turns over ace-king for one of the very few hands we actually beat on this sort of board and run out. It's a small start, but I'm not satisfied quite yet. There's a whole lot more revenge needed before we get even with this player. Alright, so up until now you guys might be thinking, this video is boring. I thought you said this would be a fun one. Well, strap on laddies, because the fun's about to start. Only a few minutes later after the last hand, the low jack limps. The hijack raises to 20, which I recognize is a pretty small raise, especially considering there's already been one limper. Suddenly, the button 3-bets to 75. It's our nemesis, who cracked our aces earlier, and whom we just took a small bit of revenge against in the last hand. I'm sitting here in the small blind with pocket 3s. Not only does our position suck, but if there's any concern that the hijack original raiser might 4-bet here, then this is just a clear fold. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. However, I think it's highly unlikely the hijack is sitting there with a 4-bet type of hand, especially considering the pre-flop action. And the button does admittedly have a stack of about 1200, so I think it's acceptable to set mine here. I make the call and everyone else folds. We go heads up, out of position, to flop of 9, 5, 8, rainbow. We do not in fact hit a set. Since I'm first to act, and I'm literally sitting here with pocket 3s, obviously I check. Our nemesis throws out a c-bet, and it's a really big c-bet. He fires 140 into the pot of 180. This is where he makes a mistake, and I plan to capitalize on it. After my first blunder with the pocket aces, I've since discovered that this particular player leans heavily on the conservative side, aside from opening with small pocket pairs apparently. So now I ask you this, would you ever bet nearly full pot with a set on this board? Because I think not. I think our opponent very specifically has an overpair here, and no other hand. On top of that, such a large bet indicates he's not particularly fond of seeing another card. I don't care what pair he's holding here. He can have aces for all I care. This board completely smashes my range for cold calling a 3-bet out of position. I'm heavily weighted towards small pocket pairs, which is exactly what I'm holding, even if my exact hand didn't hit the flop. I'm gonna pretend that it did. I mean, we have big fat guys dressing up as mall Santas. Why can't I have a bit of fun playing a little dress up as well? So I put in the good old-fashioned arrow check raise to 400. I don't know about you, but I'd be quaking in my pants if I were a conservative player facing a huge check raise when only holding one pair. Calling here would pretty much commit my opponent for his entire stack. Taking into consideration there's still a turn and river card to go. My opponent starts to tank, but he only tanks for about a minute before deciding to let his hand go, which we were very confident he would do. After which I immediately turn over my hand and add a little bit of salt to the open wound. Our opponent will later reveal that he folded pocket 10s. Alright, so even though this was a pretty enjoyable hand mentally, our opponent's one big win over us earlier still trumps both of these wins in terms of dollar amount. I'm still only about halfway there in terms of a full and complete satisfactory comeback. It's over a full hour until we play our next notable hand, but that's okay. It'll be worth the wait if we can win one over on our nemesis again. Here our good friend opens to 20 with a stack of about 400 from the cutoff. He's since been severely beaten and is sitting there with a diminished stack that makes even my tiny Asian peepee seem somewhat adequate. Sitting here with ace-8 of spades on the button, I have position and definitely a hand worth tangling, so I make the call, and everyone else folds. So for the 4th time tonight, we're about to square off. The flop comes 7, 9, queen, with 2 spades and a club. We flop the nut flush draw with our ace as an overcard. Even against a hand as strong as king-queen here, we still have between 44 to 46%, depending upon if our opponent has a spade or not. So when our opponent starts with a check, we want to start betting immediately to take control of the pot. This way we can build up the pot in case we improve, and also use fold equity to potentially take down the pot without actually hitting. Having position here is completely crucial for this to work. Out of position, I can't simply just check call all the way down and then come out firing on the river after all the logical draws have missed. So I start with a bet of 25 into the pot of 45. Our opponent possibly thinks we might just be betting due to position, so he makes the initial call. The turn brings in a deuce of hearts. We do not in fact improve. That's okay though. When our opponent checks for a second time, we take inventory of his stack and lead with another bet of 60 into the pot of 95. This should leave our opponent with a stack just shy of 300, which will be well over the size of the pot in case he calls and we miss, and we need to fire out a third bullet. Fortunately, it won't come to that as our opponent just simply folds, and we take this small pot down without needing to actually improve. This may seem like a small pot, but it's just another example of not giving up when betting with a high equity draw. So very often I see recreational players fire a single bullet when betting on a draw, but then just checking down the rest of the way and giving up once they get called if they don't improve. If your opponent has shown weakness, you need to take advantage of that and continue to show strength, especially when you have a crap ton of outs to improve. Okay, so we're about to approach the main event. This is the hand you guys have all been waiting for. So far we've tussled with our nemesis 4 times this evening. This will be the last and final match. Buckle up, boys and girls, because this one's about to get really spicy. It's been about 25 minutes since our last battle. Our opponent has since added on, and is now sitting there with a respectable stack of about 1100. Here he opens to 25 in the hijack. This is a 5x raise, so he's portraying quite a bit of strength. I call in the cutoff with 4-5 of spades, since I have position, even though this is the very bottom barrel of my suited connector calling range for this price. I would not call here out of position, nor would I call with anything lower, like deuce 3 or 3-4 suited for instance. What's the difference between deuce 3 and 4-5 suited, you may be wondering? Well, you can only make 2 different straights using deuce 3 suited where you're using both cards, but you can make 4 different straights using both cards while holding 4-5 suited. That's twice as many straight combinations, which is a pretty huge difference when playing with cards this low. Okay, so after I make the call, the button calls as well. The small blind folds when the big blind puts in an unsavory 3-bet to 120 with the large stack well over 1500. The hijack calls. It's 95 more to us. We have position to the 2 original aggressors. We have a very large stack that can potentially stand to win an extremely large pot on the right board. And so long as the button folds, we'll even be last to act. So I put in a tentative call, and thankfully the button does indeed fold. The flop comes deuce, 9, ace, rainbow, without a single spade in sight. We did manage to flop a gut shot draw, however. To our delight, the big blind starts with a 10% pot size bet of 40 into the pot of 385. What sort of ridiculousness is this? Is he holding top set? Fun fact, we actually don't mind if he is. He's giving us an insanely good price to crack him for his entire stack. Due to the action preflop, neither of our opponents can possibly put us on such a hand if an innocuous looking 3 peels off. The hijack makes the call for this absurdly small bet, and of course we get in there as well, hoping and praying for a 3. So the turn comes, and it's a 10 of diamonds. We do not in fact improve, and worse yet, now there are 2 diamonds on board. Interestingly enough, I don't know what sort of shenanigans the big blind was pulling, but he now decides to check. And it's the hijack who leads, but only for a laughable amount of 125 into the pot of 505. Now here I have to make a decision. If I call, and the big blind ends up check raising, I'm just gonna light $125 on fire. However, I don't know of very many players who ever bet 1/10 pot. Ever. And a check raise here from top set also wouldn't make sense because it's very unlikely for one of us to be holding that last ace. Most of the time, this is just going to check through, and he's going to give us a free card. It would make much more sense if the big blind had just kept firing with such a hand and increased aggression dramatically on this turn card. Still, a bet of 125 from the hijack into a pot of 505 doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. What do we know about conservative players? They very often make fear-induced bets. So on a board with various straight draws, as well as the backdoor diamond draw, if he had a strong hand here, he would slam the heck out of this pot. So I decide on a call after taking some time to deliberate, and the big blind actually ends up getting out of the way. Okay, so before we go to the river, I already told you guys this would be the main event. So you guys already got the huge spoiler alert. You already know that the 3 is coming ahead of time. Okay, so the dealer turns over the river, and dun dun dun, it's a 10 of clubs. We do not in fact hit our straight, and I'm sitting here with 5 freaking high, regretting some of my life choices. The jig is up. This really freaking blows. And it gets worse when our opponent fires a bet of 250 into the pot, leaving himself only 550 behind, with his stack of currently about 800, which is not even a considerable enough stack for me to bluff against. Sigh. What an embarrassing way for me to play my hand. How can I ever live up to the expectations of my viewers now? There are even several viewers of the channel currently on the table who have come to watch me play. Well, I suppose this is a great example of why you should never play with super small suited connectors. But you know what's weird? Why haven't I folded yet? I mean, I'm literally sitting here with 5 high. In fact, I tanked for nearly 2 full minutes. If the hijack had pocket aces, he would have 5-bet preflop guaranteed. The bet on the turn also makes absolutely no sense, taking into consideration this player's tendencies. There are way too many draws for such a small bet. His bet on the river is also way too small. That's a type of bet only a super nutted hand makes. But why am I bothering to do these mental gymnastics when I'm literally sitting here playing the board? Okay, so after tanking for so long, it's only natural that if I were truly deep in thought, I would either fold here or make a hero call, right? But as you guys know, there's no way I can hero call with 5 freaking high. And I'm not about to simply just waste everyone's time. But you know what looks as strong as heck? When after tanking for nearly 2 full minutes, I shove all in. This looks like I've been just Hollywooding this entire time, waiting for the drama to build up. And surely enough, my opponent takes barely 5 seconds to act before making the fold. Since I have so many fans of the vlog on the table, I table my hand to show them that playing with Aero in real life is every bit as exciting as watching my vlogs. After this hand, I play for another 15 minutes before my nemesis has had enough of my shenanigans and decides to leave the table. A few of my other vlog fans get up to leave as well. So I rack up my chips and head to the cage. In for 2100, since I had to rebuy for 600 after getting my aces cracked by those pocket 5s, and out for 2557 for a fun little profit of $457 after 3 hours and 31 minutes of playtime. This was not nearly as profitable as many of my other sessions, but it was definitely a fun one for me. So I thought I would go ahead and release this vlog ahead of some of my other projects that I'm still working on. If you like what you saw today, please don't forget to smash that like button. Hype this video if you can. Subscribe to the channel for more tips and tricks on how to crush low stakes, no limit hold'em. Follow me on Instagram to get details on my monthly $500 cash drawings. Check out my Patreon to see more of the coaching series and to get early access to my vlogs. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video.